Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. As President Donald Trump leaves Beijing after a two-day tightly choreographed summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, how far have the two sides actually moved beyond rhetoric toward concrete progress on trade, technology, and security? The talks expanded well beyond economics into sensitive global issues, including Iran's nuclear tensions and the war in Ukraine. Yet, much of what emerged still appears framed in broad, carefully worded commitments rather than detailed agreements. We'll discuss the latest of the meeting between the leaders of the world's two most powerful economies with Marc Lanteigne, professor, UIT, the Arctic University of Norway. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Good morning.
So this was, there's a lot of pageantry, pomp on every single level. From what we see from the optics, just give us your take. Was this a success? Was it something that's too early to tell? Is this a reset? How do we grade this summit?
I think it can be considered a success in the sense that it kept the waters calm. There was very, very long to-do list on the American side when President Trump arrived in Beijing. And there was definitely a focus on potentially improving the relationship, potentially discussing vital issues, including trade, Iran. There was a great deal of, I would say, pageantry and a great deal of photo ops, but we are still waiting for more information regarding tangible deals, especially regarding trade, Iran, and potentially other issues such as AI.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one thing that stuck out, you mentioned pageantry there and also symbolism. I think right there what we're seeing right now, President Trump was one of the very few who actually was allowed to go to this, I think, garden near the central home of the Communist Party. But nevertheless, I mean, you mentioned also trade, Professor. I mean, if we compare the visit from 2017, I think there was some kind of 250 billion tangible trade agreements that were on the table. We're still not hearing anything. What do you make of that?
Yes, well, back in 2017, there was certainly the Trump government, the first administration, was very keen on developing a much stronger trade relationship with China. So there was an announcement of a phase one trade deal, which ultimately did not amount to much. So there was a little bit of pressure this time around to set up more tangible agreements, everything from foodstuffs to aircraft to technology. And certainly, I mean, considering the fact that a large number of representatives of tech companies accompanied the president on this trip, it was pretty obvious that economics and trade, especially in high tech, would be the priority. So what we're seeing now is certainly a shift in the power between the two states. China has certainly developed greater power in regards to its economic and technological capability. But the United States, nevertheless, has been trying to convince China to, for example, open its market to American goods and to be more open to high technology trade.
Interesting there, Professor. You mentioned airplanes. Let me ask you about this as well. I mean, there's that mega deal apparently that was touted that more than 500 planes, Boeing planes, would be purchased by the Chinese. Now, that seems to be only about 200. I mean, this is what Trump had said. Stocks are already down for Boeing, I think, by 4%. You said about this shift. Does this necessarily show us maybe that America is now slightly the weaker partner in all this?
Yeah, aircraft is a very good example. Like over the past decade, China has been developing its own civilian airliner, the C-919. And as you say, Boeing was very hopeful that China would be in a position to purchase a lot of Boeing aircraft. The announcement appears to be for, as you said, 200 planes, which is a bit less than what Boeing was expecting. It definitely shows that China is becoming a little bit more cautious about purchasing American goods and that China's in a much stronger position to develop more independent industries, to become less dependent on various American industries and technology.
Mm-hmm. And also about technology, big names in tow. Trump brought everyone from Musk to Huang, from NVIDIA, you name it, lots of BlackRock, they were all there. Having all those people in the room, did that move the needle at all for tech companies having an easier way into China or vice versa?
There doesn't seem to be a pretty strong indication that there is going to be, at least in the short term, deals on technology sales. Like, for example, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, he apparently was a last-minute invite to the delegation. And there was a lot of discussion about whether American semiconductors, American chips might be more purchased by China in the future. But there doesn't seem to be a particular deal on that. And Chinese officials have been a bit vague about whether that will fit into various trade deals. The issue, though, now is that over the past decade, I mean, certainly since 2017, China's capabilities in artificial intelligence have grown a lot, to the point where China and the US are now considered to be almost neck and neck in terms of developments there. And the United States is still trying to maintain an edge. It is still trying to ensure that its AI companies are considered world beaters. But China has done a lot of catch up. Just over the past year, we've seen a lot of advances from Chinese firms.
And also, I mean, we talked about trade a bit. Let's also move it to geopolitics. I mean, with Iran, that was also something that was mentioned. Now, apparently, Trump had touted that the Chinese would withhold any sort of support, of arms supports to the Iranians. They're on the similar page. I mean, that's what Trump has said. And also Ukraine. In which regard here to these two policy areas, what do you think? Any breakthroughs in this? Will Xi Jinping have listened to Donald Trump, or if listened to what exactly?
On Iran, yes, this is interesting. So it was announced that both the United States and China are calling for the Strait of Hormuz to be open, and that's not a big surprise. The issue, though, is under what circumstances, because the situation now in the Strait is complicated, to say the least, with both Iran and the United States participating in interdicting ships. So how the Strait is going to be opened, there we are very short on details. In the case of Ukraine, well, it was just announced that Vladimir Putin will be visiting Beijing next week. So this is interesting for China, because China has been getting a lot of high-level delegations from several countries, France, UK, Canada, now Russia. And I imagine one of the major talking points when Putin arrives in Beijing will be Ukraine. And in the case of China, China certainly would like to see that conflict resolved as well. But so far, we have not seen any particular statements from the Chinese or American side about Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. And also, you mentioned other countries. I'm curious your view on this one, because, I mean, we've had these two major powers. We're scant on the details of any kind of real tangibles in terms of trade. But as you said, other countries, Canada signing a trade deal with China, the Europeans also come, the South Koreans as well. So this also shows us something, doesn't it? Does this mean that China is now the more preferred partner, that they can make something tangible? Is this a strategic decision in your mind?
Yes, China, for example, the Chinese government, and especially Xi Jinping, has been making references to changes in the international system that haven't been seen in a century. And this really demonstrates that China is much more comfortable with the idea of being a global power, including a global economic power. And yes, China is now touting itself, especially in light of the trade war, especially in light of some significant economic differences between the United States and Europe and various other trade partners. Beijing is now coming forward and saying, I am the reliable partner, I am the stable partner, I am the one that does not give any kind of complications or drama.
But on that same note, I'm curious, because a lot of those countries you mentioned, Canada, South Korea, also to an extent, the Europeans, these are all close partners of Ukraine. Now, whatever America can't really achieve, and let's say moving the needle in terms of convincing China, do these strategic connections with these other pro-Ukrainian countries, does that give, let's say, more leverage for Xi Jinping to maybe put more pressure on Putin at all?
Yes, well, a few points. First of all, it is very clear that the Ukrainian government is starting to be very frustrated with American peacemaking efforts. And it is also very apparent that many of the countries you cited are going their own way to support Ukraine, are going their own way to discuss how to help Ukraine. China has made it very clear, and this has been an issue for years, that China would very much like to be a peacemaker in this conflict, that it would like to be the one who finally mediates some kind of solution. And whether a window of opportunity has appeared, Putin has made some signals that he would like to resolve Ukraine, although we've also seen a stepping up of attacks. So where Russia stands on all this is still very unclear. So again, I imagine this is going to come up when Vladimir Putin visits Beijing next week.
Mm-hmm. I know that it's still far in the future, just kind of looking ahead as well. I mean, there's an invitation now from President Trump to Xi Jinping to come to the United States, I think in September. What do you think that kind of trajectory, it's a long way off, but what would success look like if that summit does happen?
Success, as far as the American government is concerned, would be a trade deal which allows for example, American companies to access the Chinese market, that would allow for an easing off of the trade conflict between the two great powers. And assuming that this meeting goes off as planned, this would be right before the midterm elections in the United States. And right now, with President Trump's poll numbers being so low and a lot of concerns in the US about the economic situation, the Trump government is going to want to point to a victory. So the timing for this is very significant.
All right, so it was a summit of two of the most powerful countries. We're still going to analyze all those tangibles if they are due and surface. Look, thanks for all that analysis. Much appreciated. Marc Lanteigne, a professor from the Arctic University of Norway. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.